let's take a look. We're in 51, and we went halfway around the table so far on the activities. The Ottomans chose not to launch an attack, even though they kept the war open. They tried to create a defensive line, working around Buda, hoping to defend it, but not piling up on it totally well. The Austrians were able to hit it pretty hard. Papacy played around with just the religious war side of things, which isn't getting us anywhere, except in prison. But yeah, the Habsburgs also shifting a lot of navies down here now. How good is this? How bad is it? It's hard to tell. I'm putting enough force in place that I'm going to be able, that I'm going to try to force the Ottomans into, look, give me the Buda back, and that's it. I get to keep that, and we declare peace, and we work against the Lutherans. I don't think the Ottomans are going to buy it. They have a lot of armies left, and what they're looking at is, wow, sure, we're not doing very well, but we're losing 5 points for Buda. We're not going to get much more off the Lutherans. This is your problem, man. Give me that back or else no deal, basically. And I don't really see the Habsburgs turning that. They probably will just keep trying to keep their advantage and their weight and their strength heading in this direction. I don't see them giving Buda away just in exchange. Now, how much is Venice worth? This might be the interesting thing. So Venice is worth 6 to the Ottomans, so they're not going to give that away in exchange. And I don't know what it's worth to Habsburgs. It's worthless for some reason, which doesn't sound very historical to me, although maybe it's a later period where Venice is of real great interest to them, but you can see they get it as a 6-pointer here too. That might have been a possibility, but of course the Ottomans might lose Venice in addition to other stuff they're losing. But it really looks like the Habsburgs just want to turn their strength against the Ottomans there. Now the question, and we're not up to the diplomacy, but we're just looking at what comes out of it. The question is, well, are the Habsburgs liable to gain too much off the Ottomans where somebody has to act against them? And that's a good, interesting point. Might see the Lutherans come in and sweep down and try to grab Vienna. The French war went kind of south for the French. Kind of wild and woolly. Actually, they left London, went over charged, took Plymouth, made an attempt to take Brest back. They got repulsed here. They succeeded here, but they left just a couple of units in London. I was able to sweep down with 6 units and get a fair attack with the siege. Also grabbed Bordeaux. And this means the French, are kind of losing this war. But again, it's like with the Ottomans. What do you want to do, man? Do you want to give up Bordeaux? Because that's what the English want. And Scotland, of course, just because that's too easy a launching point. But if you give them Bordeaux, what does that mean to the French? That's what the diplomatic situation is going to come as a question is, how much is that worth to the French? Because they might be willing to work with the English and engage the other players. In particular, the English, I think, have an interest in Antwerp. One or the other of them probably does. And I'm pretty sure the French have interest in some of the German territories at the very least. The Lutherans got themselves kind of hurt there, but now they've converted all of Sweden. They slipped into France, but there's too many French units in France right now. But they're hoping, hey, maybe by getting into the city, while there's no troops in there, I've got a chance of just hanging around and making good things happen. I guess that brings us to the income phase. Now, there's a problem with the income phase, and I'm not going to try to correct this. I've been screwing up and forgot about the italicized values. When you control an area a city somebody else originally controlled, you only get half the income from it. It's all a very reasonable thing. But when I start looking at what the numbers crunch down to, it doesn't really help much. the amount of cash that everybody's got on hand is probably enough to get them through the rest of the wars that are going on. Everybody's got like over $100. Yes, they spend more than that, but they take in their full income and they spend their full income. So what you're really talking about is what they pay, on like extended naval movement, or money's not as tight as I originally thought it was going to be, which means activity should start earlier than it did, and the game should be more interesting for more of the game. Bring something Kyle Seeley brought up. He's been watching these. I didn't get a chance to look at his view of it, at least. But he's saying when he played it, people started doing stuff right away. And, as you would kind of expect a group to do when they're not like going totally introspective and saying, wow, we'll run out of money, we better not do anything. I still think that there's an advantage to the hoarding money and that you want to spend quite a few turns fallow. But I think I spent too many and things haven't developed quite as much. But the other thing is, if you're behind in victory points, you're not really that behind. The only thing you're really hurt by it is, oh look, my income gets cut a little bit. Other people are getting more income. So they kind of make up for some of the losses that they spent trying to get there, right? Well, it turns out it is possible to accumulate enough cash to operate for a large portion of the game, it seems like. And what that means is, well, I don't know, that I'm not going to worry too much about that italicized income. That's what it is. That's where this line of thought went, because nobody really needs it. Chances are it hasn't had much influence on the game. If it did have influence, because you spend your entire income, the only time it would have influence is fallow turns when people are holding something that is someone else's. So there's like a buck from Scotland, which I believe was in England's hands during some kind of normal turns. Maybe there was no war. I don't think much else has actually been a factor. Because if you're at war and you capture something, you're pretty much paying that out now. Because I twist the economic rules anyway already, there's already some, those are having a little bit more effect. Like, hey, the English seized some territories, they're going to get a little bit more income now than they spent out. Actually, the payouts, England's up to 19 a turn, which is a significant increase. France is down to 15 a turn. However, they have plenty of money for the rest of the game. So that's not going to be an issue. The thing that's an issue is this discussion of how big a deal is it? France may give up, France may get Brest back in exchange for Plymouth, for example. English really do want Bordeaux, and they're probably unwilling to accept a peace without that. Trying to take the Habsburgs trying to take the Lutherans down, and maybe the Habsburgs, who look like they're gaining some important ground. I mean, Budapest has to be important, right? Hungary has to be key to them. Taking these things seems like a good idea in general. Poor Poland has been turned totally Lutheran. The Catholics, instead of running up and trying to convert that back, have been just, throwing their Jesuits in to try to debate with the missionaries. Right then, and Budapest are both too important to France and the Ottoman Empire, respectively, for them to give up. Which means they probably can't win, because the best they can probably do is regain what they lost, and the Lutherans are fine, right? The Lutherans and the papacy are the only free agents at this point, because if there's no peace here and there's no peace here, these guys aren't going to add to their ills at this point in the game. They don't have any real, great opportunities. Yeah, maybe the Spaniards have an opportunity to go grab Marseille or something like that, but not yet. Last turn of the game, if things are still open like that, sure. Right now, no. However, and the papacy in a wait-and-see mode still. doesn't feel like their armies are very effective at doing anything. However, the Lutherans say, three crappy papal armies up here. Those guys are worth 3 points each. We're a little worried about other people extending beyond us. We're not worried about that. We're not, paying attention to exact victory points, but I'm looking at the victory points and taking them into some consideration, just not, not trying to optimize, not trying to completely calculate and figure out, hey, can I win with this? Because theoretically, the way the game's supposed to be played, you're not supposed to know the victory points for people. That's why the random victory conditions were put into play, was because people would get used to what the victory conditions are. So you're really not supposed to look at their cards, but you should have a vague idea of how many points they're going to have, I think. At least possibly. So anyway, the Lutherans are declaring war on the papacy, and they paid their big money for that, which isn't that much. It's $16. They got a couple hundred in the bank. And we push into 52. I'm going to take a bit of a break, because although I'm enjoying myself, I also enjoy taking breaks. Seems to be the nature of this game. The Ottomans pull back into a defensive line. The Habsburgs try to launch attacks. 2-1 here, 3-1 siege here. Venice is not worth anything to the Habsburgs. Taking it away from the Ottomans, if they're ahead, that's great. But right now, let them stay there. But the Habsburgs just get completely crushed. Didn't want to spend extra money to try to kill a naval unit. I feel like I have the naval advantage. But that could get kind of ugly. I hope there's 2 ships here. There's only 1 over here, so we could actually get a 3-1 against that ship and the 2 units on board it, which was really the problem. But I have to get lucky getting that thing there. And 2-1 isn't. 2-1's like a 1-1 in most games. In this one, attacking is very difficult. Dancing. The English take Plymouth back after the French take Bordeaux back. What does this all mean? It means they're about even. The English have Bray. They would gladly trade it for Calais. There's quite a chance that that exchange is going to happen in a peace treaty, because it's about even otherwise. Had there been a possibility to get more? Well, those are Spaniards. I have a hard time telling the Spaniards and English apart. We're not gaining anything against each other. Maybe we'll gain something against the Lutherans or the Habsburgs or something like that. And we'll make a decision which way we're going to go, but I think we're going to see a peace there. Over here, well, the Ottomans have nothing they can gain. They have nowhere they can move against except against the Habsburgs. So, even though there's all these fleets coming, we feel like, well, at least we have a numerical advantage. We'll be able to get the first strike, maybe get Buda back, and put ourselves in the position where we're at least breaking even. That's not going to win the game, though. And there's a good chance we'll lose something like Greece, maybe even Constantinople, which would really suck. But what else can we do? They're just, there's 3 turns left. I mean, we could barely make it into like Lutheran territory, and there's just not much that's valuable to us. What's really valuable to us is stuff that the Habsburgs own. If we could win the naval battle, there's stuff over here we'd want too. Now the Habsburgs have everything everybody else wants. So, England and France have come to a peace. I'm marking these to indicate that they've ceded these. They're no longer under opposing control, and now they have to move out somehow. Now, for the English, hey, they're on a boat. The French can walk away. Both of them have chosen to go to war with the Habsburgs, though, which doesn't really solve the whole Lutheran problem. But the English get so many points for Antwerp. The French get points for Antwerp, Navarre. They don't care about Franche-Comté for some reason. But, yeah, both of them have this feeling that, yeah, we want to gain things. Now, what we may see is that France takes both of these, and then England's left out in the cold, and maybe in a position where they feel like they have to go back to war with France. Don't know. But they may try to convince the French, hey, for your victory, we have to go after the Lutherans and then try to stab them. But it doesn't make much difference, because you stab someone, like the French declare war on the Lutherans, and the English declare war on the French. Well, the Lutherans don't have any great interest in France, so they will just not prosecute the war if the French don't want to prosecute it. They don't really care. The other place the French could find points that's of interest is in Italy, but attacking the Pope comes with a cost. 2 victory points, 1 per turn. If you do it on the last turn, you only lose 1, right? Actually, you don't lose any because they have to issue an ultimatum the turn that you declare war, and you can rush in, maybe grab a territory, and before the actual excommunication takes place. So the later in the game that you do it, the better it is to hit the Pope. Meanwhile, yeah, the Ottomans and Habsburgs are tied up. The papacy and the Lutherans are tied up. Now, I jumped in and did this ahead of time, but it didn't have any effect, so I let it stand. The Lutherans went and grabbed 2 of the the ecclesiastic. Yeah. My brain is not working even as well as it used to, which isn't that great. They grabbed the 2 ecclesiastic electorates there. The 3rd of the princes of the church cities is still sitting up there, but they have enough force that they can get a 3-to-1 siege. That's it, which isn't great. Otherwise, well, I mean, we could expand ourselves into Italy, but that's just asking for someone like Spain or France to attack us. To tell you the truth, leaving those territories in papal hands seems just peachy. Uh-oh. I don't think I rolled my attacks there. We're going to take smaller slices now, I guess, because we're kind of getting to the nitty-gritty here. The Ottomans launched attacks and cleared out a lot of the Habsburgs from the empire. They took Buda back. They're probably not going to gain much. They might be able to get Hungary. They could have grabbed it this turn, but they wanted to optimize their attacks instead. Over here, they've got a navy that's in a bit of trouble, though. Then we went to the papacy, who, hey, they're shifting their forces forward to be able to directly engage the Lutheran combat units. Unfortunately, they haven't worked out an alliance with the Habsburgs yet. That I hope they do that this turn, if I remember. Moving through Tyrol is pretty damn important. If they can do that, if they could have done that, they could have provided some protection, at least to those guys who converted Bavaria and Ansbach. They're running around trying to reconvert Lutheran things. Now, this is going to come out to, rolls on this table, attempts to knock out these weak units that really don't do much except cause pain. But by throwing, singular units out, well, now the Lutherans are going to have to swarm more total points. But really, they're just going to be throwing their own weak units into those areas to stomp down the unprotected garbage that the Jesuits have out there. And now we go on to the Habsburg response, which is probably going to be largely on the naval side because we don't have a whole hell of a lot on the ground there. These guys probably shouldn't be allowed to be sitting in Spain. They're not at war. I mean, they are at war, but they weren't at war when they moved. Okay, so the weight of the Habsburgs still being thrown against the Ottomans, I guess. I forgot this attack. Ruh-roh. $3 there, $1 there. 3-to-1 siege. I didn't recover. The attacker half eliminated. Ground units are less valuable. We have to retreat too. Okay. A failure, obviously, in Athens. Athens wasn't even important to the Habsburgs, but grabbing it, puts more pressure on the Ottomans to maybe make a peace. At this point in the game, though, I doubt that it means much at all. The Ottomans are kind of locked in combat with the Habsburgs. The overall situation, well, grabbing Belgrade was the only really worthwhile thing, although killing off units is useful towards moving elsewhere. Our biggest danger, though, is the French and the English, who are both at war with the Habsburgs. We ran out of Franche-Comté, grabbed Dijon and Marseille. Marseille is actually very valuable to us, and are concentrating on trying to take some points from the French, because they're going to take some points from us, and we're counting on losing the Netherlands. We just don't. I forgot about these guys. The Habsburgs are all over the fucking place, which is part of the problem. Let's get out of there. Let's go here. Let's cover that space. Which is part of their problem, is that they just have so much to defend. If they can concentrate their force like they've been able to against the Ottomans, that's great. But now they've got enemies cropping up everywhere, and all at once, it looks like their world's collapsing. Now, I guess we move on to those, not quite allies, but co-belligerents, the French and English, and see what they can do. French are able to jump the gun and grab the Netherlands. That leaves the English out in the cold, basically. They also took back Magdeburg, Dijon, no advance on Navarre, etc., but they're the ones gaining the most out of an attack on the Habsburgs. The English, in response, moved to Calais, positioning themselves to probably move against France again. There's not a lot of time left, only 2 turns though. But that is of more interest than attacking the Lutherans. France has pretty much recovered they look the most in the lead at this point, actually. So the English moving against them is appealing. The Habsburgs don't really care about Franche-Comté, but I don't know, it's the French that don't care about it. I think the Habsburgs care. I can't keep track of who's got what conditions in some of these multiplayer games where it's kind of light. It's much easier in something like Here I Stand, where there's physical objects on the map and on the player aids that help you. Certainly there's these player aids, but I can't just look at them and assess the situation, because they're not all spread out. They're small text instead of but it's fine when you're playing just one power. You can look at your player aid and you understand what you need. And then over to the Lutherans. They failed to take Cologne here, but managed some successes elsewhere, although they did get some guys imprisoned down here and lost Geneva. They have to be careful, because I don't, again, have physical markers on the map. All I have is the written record of who is what religion. Not optimal for assessing the board state, right? These little things are very helpful, but there's just not room for them all in Germany. And especially since Germany's almost all Lutheran, I didn't want to use the blue markers for that, and I don't have a ton of, say, red tiddlywinks that I could use against the areas that I expect to be Lutheran. One thing I noticed I forgot to go convert Norway, so I'm going to have to walk up there, and that's what that one guy's doing. I guess that's about it, except for figuring out what the diplomatic consequences are. I don't know what to do with the Ottoman. Yeah, I can't see the Ottomans letting the Habsburgs off the hook here. I'm trying to see if there's any other diplomacy that I see happening. There's the potential for the French and the Habsburgs to come to an agreement, but I think France has points to gain in Navarre. They're just worried about the English at this point and the possibility of the English coming in. We have gained some decent points by grabbing the Netherlands. It's not a whole hell of a lot. It's like 6 points. Not enough to make up for what the Lutherans have. But the big question then remains, well, how much can I grab what's left? I would kind of like to take some other things, like part of North Italy, and move against the papacy there. Yeah, it's really gotten down to this tight period in the game where that's kind of difficult. And I could see both the Habsburgs and the French making an agreement to go against the papacy and try to grab the North Italian points as pretty much their best route right now. The problem is it's difficult to get at all this stuff. So like if the Habsburgs and French agree, well, the Habsburgs could go grab Savoy, and now the French are cut out, just like they cut the English out in the Netherlands. And France has to be aware of that. There's just not that much time, so unless like something was handed to them, or the Habsburgs and the French came to an alliance and agreed to give pass-through rights. But even those don't really guarantee anything, because I can probably take both Savoy and Genoa, and there's just no room for the French to do much. They could attack Switzerland, but I don't think they even care about Switzerland. And again, this is we gotta read this chart for everything. So I don't see anything in Switzerland there. So I don't really see that agreement coming to play, which kind of comes down to, hey, is the French and English war gonna have to reopen, or do we go after the Lutherans and see what we can do? The problem with that is, whatever territories we take from the Lutherans, we have to hope that the papacy can go in and convert. And a bunch of French armies rampaging around in areas, if there's no city present, isn't going to help that. So I think like the time to crush the Lutherans is largely past, because it really takes a concentrated effort to destroy their armies so that the papacy can go in and do its conversion. And of course, if you do all that work for the papacy, you're kind of handing them the same kind of point situation that the Lutherans kind of get automatically. So making that decision early on seems kind of painful. Diplomatic effects that took place. France and the Habsburgs actually did come to a peace. Remember, the Habsburgs were at war with England. They didn't make a peace with England there. The English aren't terribly interested in anything the Habsburgs own anymore, and they didn't conduct any military operations against the Habsburgs, which would mean that this situation will dissolve at the end of this turn if nothing's done. But it does put a restriction on, hey, we can't abandon London and other places the Habsburgs might be interested in. We have to defend our coastal territory, which might mean Ireland, or something. Who knows? The Ottomans are, of course, not letting the Habsburgs off the hook. The Habsburgs are not declaring an additional war. However, they have an intention to try to get into Venice or something where they can strike at Milan. The French have declared war on the papacy. An ultimatum's been issued. Next turn, it goes into effect with an excommunication, which means it's going to be 2 victory points for France to do this, but it looks like there's enough meat that the French want down here, Genoa, Savoy, whatever, that, it's no big deal for them to take that penalty. They're going to gain more points off of it, assuming that whatever they divert that's already way down south is not needed to defend themselves against, say, the English. And the English, of course, went to war with France because they have no other outlet to use their troops on, and just aren't gaining enough points. Like I said, the Lutherans, they don't really care about losing territory. They care if the Ottomans take stuff here. They care about conversion. Their conversions and papal conversions. And they've got a whole bunch of points in the bank. The only way to take their conversions away is either for the papal forces to go in and do it themselves, or to do it with support of enemy armies that can chase the Lutheran armies away. Nobody's got a huge interest in this except maybe the Habsburgs right now, as far as I can see. The Habsburgs are interested in things like Saxony and Hesse, which of course isn't written on the map, but I think is here. There are a couple of spaces that aren't written on the map, this one and this one. And I don't remember which one's which. Nice, huh? These were on the map in the original. It's just good old Excalibur fucked that up, along with a few other things, and didn't, put the errata in, which is really... The game doesn't make sense without the errata, basically. And we'll move on. First half of the players again. The Ottomans swept into Hungary. There were Habsburgs there, so it hasn't fallen yet. And they defeated some of the Habsburgs, I think. Maybe not, I don't know. Doesn't look like it. And that's really about it. They just kind of shifted into, a position where they're able to maybe do more, although in the realm of next turn, they really can't get very far with these forces. So, I don't know. The Habsburgs, the papacy went and actually burned some Lutherans at the stake over in Metz and made some advances on the religious front. There aren't a lot of Lutheran missionaries left. The Habsburgs have actually gotten the advantage at this point. Now that may change. There's a lot in the stack coming back, etc. But there's some hope of being able to convert some things. So, and what's really hard because there's no map representation with what I chose. So like Bavaria is now Catholic, Metz is Catholic, all of Switzerland's Catholic again. We've regained some of our original positions. Of course, Austria and Bohemia and Poland are all Protestant, for whatever that matters. The Habsburgs came back. They're swinging around this way, trying to get themselves into a position where they could maybe get Milan, which is worth something to them if they declare war on the Pope. I gotta remember to charge the French a victory point. They also went up and grabbed Scotland, because the English are at war with the Habsburgs, and, the Habsburgs weren't willing to let them out of it, even though the English couldn't gain anything from it any longer. And they grabbed Athens down here, which is worthless to them. Now on to the other side of things. The French building a barrier against the English. Up here they took Plymouth, and down here they took Genoa. They made a shot at Milan, but didn't get it. Milan's worth a lot to them too. For the English, there's nothing easy. Edinburgh's probably the easiest and only valuable thing within reach. Everything else, pretty tough to reach at this point. Maybe they can set it up so they can hit it on the final turn, maybe. Or maybe they can grab something like Rouen, which would be particularly bonus because that puts them near Paris and puts France in all kind of jeopardy. English got repulsed at Plymouth. These were some low-odds sieges. They ended up taking Rouen, but it's not terribly useful because they only took it with boats. And they're positioning themselves to go try to take Scotland back, hoping that they can end up just a little bit ahead. Between Scotland and Rouen, we're talking like 15 points. If I can get Plymouth back, I'll be at plus 15. That's not too terribly bad. I'll probably be in, the good side of the board that way, as opposed to, say, the Habsburgs, who look like they're probably looking at negative points. Of course, I've got that -4 victory points for the divorce question. The Lutherans managed to finally take Cologne here, and They got Bavaria back. You know, without armies, you can't convert things like Bavaria. And with the Lutherans going second, they will be able to counter just about anything that the papacy can do. They ended up throwing a pretty decent stack of Jesuits into prison. Those guys are never going to come into play because the reinforcement phase is the last step in the game, essentially. So I can just clean these guys off and not worry about spending money on reinforcements. This isn't the final money, but the lowest we're looking at is like 50, 65 for the Ottomans. So, and they're the ones who started the wars, right? So the amount of time that I spent without warring was probably a little excessive, but maybe not all that much. Now, some of the countries who haven't been at war much do have some stockpiles of money. And remember, other people can loan you money, and within a certain restrictions. If you're Catholic, you can't loan to another Catholic country without the Pope's blessing. You have to funnel it through the Pope, and the Pope could take... The Pope can't take interest, but they could make a loan that extends beyond the game. So they could be like, okay, well, you have to give me $50 and I'll give 25 to them, and we'll make all these loans last throughout the game so that, you know, there's no repayment required or whatever. Or even if repayments are required, you can default on it and it's no big deal. The whole economic system has some flaws in it, but the fact that Catholics have to funnel the money through the Pope is kind of important if they're going to other Catholics. But Catholics can funnel money to, say, the Ottomans and Lutherans without it being too big a problem. I think they could be banned for it. I'm not sure what the excommunication rules are, because that involves a treaty, and a treaty with a non-Catholic nation is a problem. What else do we have? Well, we haven't gotten the income yet. And, you know, so like the Ottomans are still going to get enough money. They're not going to have any problem. They have several turns worth of operating expenses in hand. So again, I think I collected way too much cash, spending half the game doing nothing. I'm not sure how much it matters, though. There are very few things that I think you want to do early in the game. And again, I've been having this conversation with Kyle Seeley, who's also played this and done a video on it. One of the things is you can wipe somebody out. And that's kind of big. Like, if you take London, the English aren't going to build more troops, right? Well, we saw they could retake it. But assuming that you can take, you know, London and then whittle down what's left, then you can conquer England and probably hold it without much. And unless somebody goes and reconquers London and hands it back to the English, which maybe somebody would want to, but a lot of people would rather keep it because it's got good income and, you know, all kind of fun things. Although I can see good reasons, like that the Lutherans would do that if they could. They can't sail over there, though, so that's not really an issue for them. But, and I can't see, the Habsburgs get points for London, the French get points for London, at least in the basic game, so unless the Ottomans are going to sail up there. So you could take a player like England or France out of the game pretty easily. It would be pretty hard to take the Habsburgs out of the game, but you might be able to knock them out of this portion of the map if you're the Ottomans, or out of this portion of the map if you're the French, if they're not devoting enough resources over there. And I mean, likewise, you know, here they can't even build troops, so. So that's one of the things you can do. Another one that looks like it's of value is you can grab the Italian territories. Why is that of value? Because they're very, very easy to take, with one exception, which is if a player ends up, well, if you play with the optional garrisons for neutrals rule, nothing's easy to take that's neutral. You can just write those off. You're not going to get them without a massive undertaking. But they're fairly easy to take when they're neutral. If you don't play with that optional rule, you just have to walk through them. It'll cost you a full turn's income to do that. Well, not walk through them, but enter them. It'll cost you a full turn's income to take them, but, you know, now, if somebody else wants them, So like France or Spain or the Habsburgs could end up intervening in Italy and grabbing some territory. If someone else wants them, they have to go to war with you. And that's a major cost. They can't just attack without a declaration of war the turn before, so they had to pay the full income at least 2 turns. Now, they may be doing other things in between. We've usually seen you do rolling wars. If you're at war and you moved your pieces and fought, well, even if you're going to peace, you probably want to start another war, which is one reason to hoard your money. Because we can see it kind of, it's hard to end up completely at peace again just because there's that bonus. Hey, if I'm going to declare war, it's going to cost me a full turn's income. But anyway, grabbing these guys fairly early seems like it has some value. And then you get that income bonus. And if you end up at peace, you get to hoard a little bit more money off those Italian states, just like if you capture something else. Another interesting step might be try to squish the Protestants. We'll see how well they do. But they're kind of the baseline. And from what I've read online, a lot of groups, the Lutherans always win, just because everything else kind of balances out. They're the one player who doesn't really have to do much to collect a lot of victory points. The papacy gets sort of a bunch of that advantage, though. If you hit the Lutherans too hard, the papacy gets the other side of that advantage, because they can then possibly convert things. The problem with that, though, is the armies that are present, that are making it possible for the papacy to convert things, those guys are the ones who have the choice as to which country is, which of the 2 players is going to be able to convert things. So they can kind of keep it at a balance there and make sure neither side is gaining victory points. But the default position is all of Germany kind of falls to the Lutherans, and some of it's worth victory points to them. So they're going to be standing there with I don't know how many victory points. Given that the 3 cathedral towns fell, that's an extra 9 victory points. That's a pretty big chunk right there. So, and then, things like Poland, that's going to be hard for anyone but the Lutherans to convert. Obviously, Sweden comes to them to begin with, but Denmark, Norway, these are things they can probably grab without too much trouble. They also have a thought about, geez, if there aren't a lot of troops in England, slip somebody in there. It might be hard to do right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we could get in there. So, if there's 5 or less, it's worth a shot. It's not a lot of points, but a little bit extra. As the turn rolls to a close, we have more money out, but no wars have been resolved. The Habsburgs, the Lutherans declared war on France with the hope that maybe they can pick off some French up here and gain a shot at converting France. They don't think France is going to be able to gain anything on them, and they really don't care. They care about conversions. Their armies are only good to help lead their conversions, much like the papal armies. I mean, the papal armies, it gain things. At least the Lutherans care about income, but not at this point in the game. And the Habsburgs declared war on the Lutherans. And that's really all that happened. I guess the Ottomans could declare war on the Lutherans too. There is some potential value to that. I think there are some Ottoman territories in there, so let me just write that one down too. And the idea there is just, I don't think it's going to matter for the Ottomans, but the Habsburgs have things like Saxony that they could actually grab. And again, the Lutherans don't really care about that. The only thing they care about with that is, we don't want the Habsburgs to have more points than we do. And we don't think that's going to be the case with the Netherlands having fallen. Even though they have Scotland, they might be able to get Ireland. They've got things that, are of some value. Right, time for a break. That's a big one. The Habsburgs just got driven out of Vienna. I am going to leave some forces, let me see what they have available. 2, 4, let's see, there's 6, there's 10. You can get a 2-to-1 on Vienna. See, I don't want to lose Hungary. That's the problem. Hungary is worth almost as much as Vienna. So I'm going to leave 2 units back here to help defend Hungary. But as things stand right now, I just gained Hungary and Vienna, which is a lot of points. I'm not worried about cash at all anymore. I could just put the money away at this point. Everybody's got enough money to do whatever the hell they want on this final turn of the game. So it's just a matter of kind of rolling the dice. But that's a big one, a 1-to-1 siege. A whole big pile went in there, and now it's going to be hard for the Habsburgs to get that back. They're really ending up in the loser's position at this point. And a not completely unexpected thing, combination of chaos and annoying calculations occur on the last turn of the game. The papacy spread out all over the place, converting all kind of things. They probably weren't going to keep them, except they were working hand in hand with the Habsburgs, who rushed in and grabbed a bunch of territories. Württemberg, Hesse, Saxony, Brandenburg. There's a whole bunch of points there. They're ignoring Vienna. Oops, forgot about attacking. I got a siege that's not going to work over in... oh, it does work. Over in Venice. I guess I can flee there. That's not going to change control because I didn't take it in my own turn. But if I stay here, Venice doesn't, as a province, doesn't change control from Turkish, which is actually a benefit. It's not worth any points, but that's okay. We launched an attack here on Buda. It did not work, but we ignored Vienna entirely. We took Bucharest. Of course, we have Athens. And we swept things over there. We took Dublin. Again, these wouldn't hold if it weren't last turn on the game, especially the Lutheran ones. Those actually might get reversed. The Lutherans have a lot of armies that they can throw in. They've got to decide. They don't really lose points for giving these up, but they're actually worth quite a few points to the Austrians. Feeling like they were far behind, launched a few interesting attacks. Calais is worth less than them than Rouen. They did a 3-to-1 attack on Rouen. You can see they fell back, and Paris is at risk now. 1, 2, 3, 4 troops from Calais can make it to Paris. There's no way the Lutherans can come swarming in and take that, but they could take Dijon, which might be cool. They did a 1-to-1 on Metz, high odds thing. That didn't work. That leaves not much difference. I mean, they could have covered Dijon with that. They did a 1-to-1 on Milan, where they lost the unit. That probably isn't going to cost them anything at all. Milan is worth a lot of points, but they didn't gain their big advantage. They left a big garrison here in the Netherlands. They didn't want that taken away. They decided not to take the risk of trying to take London, and that moves us to the English. Lutherans focus, I guess, on the things that are most important to them. Ouch. Yeah, but this wasn't Catholic converted Saxony here. It would be worth 9 points if it was converted, and Brandenburg, likewise, I'm sure is worth a pile. No, Brandenburg is not on the list. It's weird because there are ones that are sort of auto-conversions. Württemberg and Brandenburg are 2 of them. It doesn't matter which religion they go to as far as the Lutherans are concerned, which I find really strange. They neither gain points nor lose points in either direction as far as I can see. Anyway, we did convert Württemberg back. We converted just about everything back. The only exception was Nuremberg here, and we actually got back into the Swiss territory. It's done. Now all that's left is time to count the beans. Yeah. So and that counting is not going to be trivial, but because we have to go through each chart and look through. And this is the problem with assessing the thing. So, okay. Oh, we do have one big pain. Vienna fell. There was really nothing we could do about it. We weren't, Austria as a whole hadn't fallen, We could have gotten an alliance to try to regain it, I guess. And if we captured it, we could give it, we could either take it or give it back to the Austrians. But we didn't have a lot of forces. With the Habsburgs, oh no, we're at war with, that would have had to march in. But with the Habsburgs taking so many of our territories, that 6 points is probably worth giving up. But that's a big hit, actually, which might bring this into question, especially since the papacy managed to hold most of those Italian states, which are worth 3 points each. I don't think Switzerland is counted as an Italian state for this. I don't think Naples is, but I'm really not sure. There's no definition of what the Italian states are that I'm aware of. Maybe I can find it somewhere. But Orange is just neutral. It's not the Italian states. So I would tend to not think the papacy was all that interested in conquering Switzerland. They were really interested in that North Italian area. You might have convinced me that they're interested in Naples, Sardinia, and Sicily as well. Maybe. I have to say I'm a little disappointed with where the points ended up. The Lutherans ended up winning with 31 points. England ended up at 9. You really kind of have to at second. France is at negative 19. Now, they had a lot of points going for them, but losing Paris is just too much of a hit. And that's the thing. You can't really afford to lose your big places. They tend to be a huge penalty for you. In the case of Paris, it was a 20-point hit. It's only 10 points for the English, so the net in terms of who got something, well, the English ended up ahead, but they took some losses as well. Plymouth was big, Ireland is big. So, their points were kept within a reasonable level. But this is really tough to go against, especially if you have the feeling that things are balanced. Now, I guess if you totally counted victory points, which the game sort of indicates you shouldn't even be doing, you wouldn't be able to make that. Well, of course, the Lutheran and papal victory points are fixed, even if you're playing with random victory points, so you would have an idea with them. But yeah, it definitely feels like unless you're counting victory points and unless the players go through a general agreement to try to destroy the Lutherans as a player, they're just going to be too potent. They're going to have too big a victory point total. It's really hard because they move last, so as long as they have a fair amount of missionaries left, they can act. And in this case, they were able to take a good deal of points away from the Habsburgs, ended up at -4. Some points away from the papacy, who ended up at +2. Now, a lot of people lose points to these electorates. I think the players should be trying to prevent the ecclesiastical electorates from falling to the Lutherans. That's a 9-point advantage for the Lutherans, but it's also like a 6-point advantage, a 6-point loss for the Habsburgs. I don't know if the French care about it. The French do not care. The papacy does. I doubt the English care. But anyway, there were a lot of weird things going on. So like Saxony falling to the Habsburgs, that's a penalty for England. Good luck England doing much about that. But they can exert power to weaken the Habsburgs in Austria so that they're not able to do it. But then, whoever takes that vacuum, the Ottomans or whatever, probably are a bigger threat than the threat of the Habsburgs being able to take Saxony, which maybe the Lutherans can stop, Yeah. But, my feeling was the Lutherans just are sitting on this bank of points. I didn't realize quite how big it was. I thought they were looking at more like 10, 15-point lead, that as long as some other players made massive gains, and England kind of did, with capturing Paris, as long as, and they got Edinburgh back, which was big. As long as other players made massive enough gains without taking losses, they should be able to counteract the victory point total the Lutherans get. Yeah, it just ain't so. I mean, England would have to wipe France off the map. And even then, I don't know if there's enough points. Obviously, if they wipe France off the map without losing any points, because we're looking at, let's see, Ireland. We lost Ireland and we lost Plymouth. So Dublin and Plymouth. Those are our negatives. And Saxony. Oh, and there's a Lutheran missionary, which the Lutherans got like a point for too, didn't they? No, they did not. They just did it to screw the English. And again, you know, if you didn't know what the victory conditions are, you wouldn't know to do that. So, so let's see. What did we lose points for? We lost points for 4 for Saxony, 8 with Dublin, Plymouth, 15 points. So that puts us with this. If we had all 15 of those points, we'd be at 34, which would put us in the lead. So if we had lost nothing and gotten the gains we got, we would be beating the Lutherans. Does it seem like the Lutherans are doing all that well? Yeah, kinda. I mean, they were able to convert everything back. All of Germany is, except for Nuremberg, is Lutheran now. So, you know, and their penalties are all in Germany. And you can see they got all the exterior stuff, but that's really hard to prevent them from taking, I think. So without kind of putting the real squeeze on them and stealing away some of their provinces so they can't rebuild their armies. And you know, so people have to really crack down on them. And I think it's not unrealistic that they win the game if people don't crack down on them. What's difficult is there's not a lot of incentive to go to war with the Lutherans for most of the players, other than the fact that they've got this bank of points. And that's the thing you have to look at, you know. Whoever the Lutheran player is, whoever's not a Lutheran player has to be aware the Lutherans have a huge bank of points if no one does anything. And I was aware of that and thought that other people had a shot at it. I thought a lot of other people had a shot at it, actually, because things got so wild and woolly at the end. But wild and woolly doesn't necessarily mean positive points for people. You know, like the Ottomans ended up at negative points after taking Vienna, you know, Vienna and Hungary. What were their big negatives here? Yeah, that's interesting. Well, they lost Bucharest, which is a 10-point hit, because it's so deep in, it hurts the hell out of them, because they were protecting stuff deep closer to the borders. And then, of course, they lost Athens, another 10-point hit. Stuff that nobody really cared much about. The Habsburgs got some points for Bucharest. And, you know, it could be worse. They could lose Constantinople that nobody wants, but it's worth a 20-point hit for them. But yeah, you know, that's 20 points that were taken away from them. That would put them at a 16, which seems a little low for taking Vienna, Hungary, and, well, no, they didn't get Venice, but they had Venice and not long before. But yeah, I mean, how much more do the Ottomans really want to do? And they end up with a negative point total. Right? On the other hand, the Habsburgs lose Austria, gain some crap up here, and they end up with a positive point total. What did they really gain? Well, they took Venice, they took Bucharest, Athens, which is worthless to them, but they took some of those German states, and somehow that makes up for the loss of Vienna. Yeah, I don't think so. Because the loss of Austria, well, Austria is not lost yet, but the loss of Vienna and Hungary, they're pretty damn close to, there is no Habsburg Empire. You know, there is no Austrian Habsburgs anymore. They're going to be a Mediterranean power centered in Spain. Anyway, it's definitely not, you know, a historically detailed and accurate game. And with the craziness at the end, some of the other aspects of it, once you throw away any idea of that, it becomes kind of a cool Ameritrash type game in a lot of ways. Heavier in the rules, a little bit complexity, but you know, people who can enjoy something like Pax Britannica or something can probably enjoy this too. without too much trouble. People enjoy Britannia. This isn't a bad game, but you have to understand the victory points in a way that the game rules try to say, yeah, don't bother with those. You don't want to know those. They'll screw you up. I like the idea of you don't want to know those. They'll screw you up. But definitely you need to understand the kind of points that the Lutherans and the papacy, for that matter, can bank. Now, the papacy, their big negative here, they lost a lot of points. They would have been about positive 20 if it weren't for the electorates in Vienna fall, with the combination of things they got. And that's losing most of the religious war. All right, let's send this up and clean it up. Get the rest of my EU counters where they belong. And I'll come back with a review, I suppose.